Hi, I'm Maria from Pause Alchemy of Women, and we're going live today with my new friend Shay, who is going to talk to us about some interesting takes on some health challenges she's had and advocating for yourself. And I am really excited to talk to you today, Shay. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really excited to be doing this with you.
Me too. Okay, well, let's just jump in then. So, just a little background. I met Shay in a program that we were doing together, and she reached out to me about some things that she wanted to talk about. And I found it really interesting because, between me talking about menopause and women's issues in general and the challenges that we specifically face as women, this piece of medical treatment and trying to talk to doctors, whether it's about menopause or a hysterectomy or really anything, we're traditionally not given the attention. And if you're a person of color or if you're differently abled or anything, it's even worse. But definitely women, I mean, it's been shown that we don't get the sort of attention that we need. And so, do you want to talk a little bit about any of your experience with that, or how do you want to start?
Yeah, I would love to. So I think that as we age, a lot of us have more medical conditions, and that's been my case. I have several. And so what I found is when I would go see certain doctors, they were not giving me the information I needed for one, or they were not listening to me.
Mhm.
So I would tell them I was having a certain problem, and not every doctor took it seriously. So I really had to advocate for myself and speak up for myself. And sometimes that meant seeing more than one doctor. If one didn't work, I would try someone else until I found one that listened and helped me with whatever medical issue it was that I was having.
And how long, like, so I know you did find out some diagnosis, but how long do you feel like you were going in and saying things that they were not listening? Like, how long did that go on before you got any sort of answers?
That's a good question. It
Yeah.
did depend on, like, the situation or diagnosis, but I will say, I have had back pain pretty much since high school, and I started to have pain in other areas of my body. And most doctors would kind of brush it off like, well, you're really young to be having this much pain, but you're a mom, and, sometimes we're in pain. And so I had
God.
to see a couple of specialists, and then I got diagnosed with fibromyalgia, and that probably took, ooh, at least 8 months and 3 different doctors.
Hmm. And all that time you're saying like, I have all this pain, I have this problem, and they're like, it's just like,
Yeah.
or what were they saying?
Yeah, for my experience, a lot of my conditions cause physical pain, and that has been a hard one for me because, not every doctor wants to treat pain, or they wanna do it in ways that don't last.
Mhm.
And pain is a really hard one to have and deal with every day.
Yeah, we were saying this yesterday because we had a little pre-podcast chat about this theme of like what there's no way that I can understand what pain feels like you, and the reverse, you can't. And we talked about the scale of 1 to 10 and what the hell that even means because what is a 9 for you and what's a 9 for me? I'm very highly sensitive and I don't have a very high pain tolerance, but um, that doesn't make it less valid just because, well, you could suck it up and I can't. And also, I would say that that's kind of another topic of this. Oh, just like tough it out. I
Yeah.
got taught, in softball, like breaking your like fracturing your ankle or something, just walk it off. Like
Yeah.
so. There's that theme, but how did you finally, you talked about advocating for yourself, so how do you feel like you finally, maybe you got the right doctor, but also how do you feel like you got to that diagnosis, and advocating for yourself specifically?
Well, It wasn't very easy because, it was a lot of work to go see all these doctors with my insurance. So I'm having to call my PCP, my primary doctor, to get a referral to all these specialists. And wait times to see the doctor can be really long.
Mm,
But I haven't always been really good about advocating for myself because I have really bad anxiety. And
mhm,
so what I did like the first two times, I was the type of person, especially before my healing journey, that would be driving to the office like, okay, I'm going to tell my doctor this because I knew it was something against what they were advising me or whatever information they were giving that was brushing me off. And
mhm.
so the first couple of points I did that, my kind of spirit persona is Wonder Woman. I love Wonder Woman. So I had this little Wonder Woman and I
Had
stuck
that
her.
shirt on yesterday when we talked. Just
Yeah.
FYI, I had a Wonder Woman t-shirt on yesterday.
Yes. So I had a little Wonder Woman figure and I put her in my pocket, and mentally she was my advocate and she was going to speak up for me through me. And that sounds silly, but if you're a woman who deals with anxiety or it's hard for you to talk to your doctors, sometimes we need a little trick. So after that, I just had dealt with this pain for so long, that I was determined to see a specialist who could tell me what it was. Because, like we talked about yesterday, sometimes having a diagnosis eases your mind. And with
Right.
the pain scale, with fibromyalgia, when the nurse comes in, she just says, "How's your pain today from 1 to 10?" So you don't have much of an opportunity to go, "Well, my lower back is at a 9, but my right knee is at a 4 and my wrists are at a 6." So,
Right.
yeah.
And with fibromyalgia, it tends to move around too, right? So it's kind
Yeah.
of like you don't necessarily, it's not the same thing, which I think leads to this like non-validation of your feelings and of your pain because you're like, well, last week you came in, it was your back, now it's your wrist, now it's your elbow. you
Yeah,
know,
that was kind of the response I had until I saw the specialist. And I also found when you have a diagnosis, doctors better know how to treat you, and in my experience, they seem to take me and my pain more seriously, knowing that I have fibromyalgia.
mm, okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I
so
was wondering,
sometimes I'm
sorry, go ahead.
sorry, go ahead. I was just
I was
gonna
just
say
wondering,
sometimes, like,
we always do this on all of our calls. We always want to talk at the same time. We get excited.
go
That's why
ahead.
I have notes. I have notes so we don't get too off track. You.
Okay, so what I was gonna say is that in getting a diagnosis, it did give me more validation for myself, and more validation from doctors because it is really hard when you go in and you're having this pain or whatever side effects you're having from a condition, because you're dealing with it every day and these doctors don't take you seriously. And
Mhm.
I have heard that happen more with women than men, just in my experience, that we're
Mhm.
not seen as knowing our bodies super well, when we do. And so we have to really advocate that for ourselves and stand up for ourselves when we're not getting the help we need.
Well, that actually was going to be the question that I asked. Did you ever experience, because I have, when you have someone else with you, especially like your husband, for instance, if the was the response different at all? Or did you ever notice that?
Yes, that's a really good question. So, my husband goes to a lot of my appointments with me because I have ADHD and my memory is not very good. So he can remember exactly all my medicines and the dosage. Plus,
Mhm.
it helps with my anxiety to have him with me, and I'm more able to speak up for myself. But I did notice, because he's seen a lot of different doctors with me, when he is present with me, because my husband is very tall and broad, I do get more respect, I get more help, and I get more compassion.
Ugh, so gross.
Yeah,
And I'm
and
sorry, I'm
the
going to do this
thing.
very unprofessional thing and open my door for my dog who will scratch at the door for literally an hour.
Yeah. So I was just gonna say that this mainly happened to me with male doctors. Female doctors, in my experience, were more compassionate and validated me trusting that I know my body. A lot of the issues that I had were with male doctors. So that's where I really noticed when my husband came in that they were more responsive and showed me more compassion.
Yeah, and I mean, I have male viewers sometimes, and this isn't about male bashing. This is just like a very real thing that happens. I have noticed that as well. It's like, yeah, okay. Especially, I usually, my whole life I've looked a lot younger than I
Yeah.
am, and I've gotten the like, oh, okay, like you're a little
Yeah.
girl, and I'm like, well, I'm the one inside of my body, so I probably know.
Yeah. It's kind
And
of insulting when that happens.
which, I mean, and then we to go towards more like kind of the gynecological side of things. I mean, it's just realistic. We don't have the same parts. So you're never going to know how it feels, even if you are the best doctor in the world. You're
Yeah.
just not going to know because you don't know what it feels like to have our parts inside. Um, and so I know that's some of other challenges that you've had. If you'd like to go to either of the topics, either of your surgeries, and tell us a little bit about your experience that you had with that,
Sure.
whatever you're
Yeah,
first.
absolutely. So the first experience that I had was I got a device called eSure after I had my last child, and it is a permanent birth control, metal coils that go into your fallopian tubes. And I did not get good information before I had this. And I got this done and started having a lot of complications with it. And so I had to have it removed, and the only way to do that was to have a hysterectomy. And I was in my 30s when this happened. I was not prepared to have a hysterectomy. And even though at the time I didn't want more children, having that taken away from me as a woman and it not being my choice was really hard to process.
Yeah,
So
it's a decision that even if yeah, maybe you don't know, but that's a pretty final decision, if
yeah,
especially being yours.
and
Mhm.
especially at that young age, it's kind of made me feel like less of a woman for a while. It threw me into menopause in my 30s. Um, so that one was difficult. And then about 8 months ago now, um, I was having problems with my bladder. And I went to see a surgeon for a prolapse bladder where it has kind of fallen down and they reattach it. Um, And once they got me into what was supposed to be a 90-minute surgery, I was in surgery for about 6.5 hours because they found a very large cyst that they had to remove. In the process of removing it, they punctured my bladder. So that was a much longer recovery with a lot of hard things to deal with, like having to have a catheter for 3 weeks that I just wasn't prepared for.
Now with either of these, like so say the e-shore, is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Was that were you informed about, like, I know you said, oh, it's permanent, but I don't know. I wouldn't think of it as like, oh, if you want it removed, we have to take out your whole uterus and everything, like what was that something that you were really informed about before you got it put in?
That's a really good question too. eSure now has a black box warning because of the side effects. However, I was not advised of ill side effects. I was not advised that if you ever want it removed, you will have to have a hysterectomy to have it removed. And when I went in after I had my son and I wanted to ensure I didn't get pregnant again, I was thinking birth control, like maybe an IUD, something along those lines.
Mm.
And my doctor recommended Esure. And a lot of doctors, they get kickbacks if they recommend certain things. But so I just thought this is going to be an easy permanent birth control. You're awake when it's inserted. It's not pleasant, but it seemed less permanent to me than like, or less invasive, I guess, than like having my tubes tied or something like that. So I didn't know the risk. I didn't know that it might have to be taken out. The most information I got was this little pamphlet from the Esher company that, tells you that it's a permanent birth control. It doesn't have all these potential risk listed on it. So I was really ill informed.
Yeah, that's very hard. So,
Yeah.
um, and so when you got the hysterectomy, were you did you have any sort of, did you get any hormones? Did you get any counseling? Did they talk to you about was there any sort of, um, personal emotional counseling? I think I already know the answer, but did you receive anything like that, either hormonally or anything, information?
No, it was just going in for a surgical procedure, the procedure getting done, and any aftercare was just about how to take care of my body during the healing process. Like a doctor would normally give you, if you're in pain,
Like if you
take
got
time
a
off,
knee
whatever.
surgery or something.
Yeah, exactly. And so any of that support that I would have had, I would have had to seek out for myself without any recommendation from my surgeon or any other doctors that I was seeing at that time. And being as young as I was, I didn't think to do that for myself. So that, I think made the process harder for me. And it would have been nice to have a provider suggest that, because when you're mentally dealing with the surgery, having it done, the aftercare, it's a lot on your mental plate. And for me, and I think maybe a lot of women have done this, we get so used to putting our needs last. That was the place I was in at the time. And so I didn't think to do this for myself. I just thought, oh, I need to make sure I rest for this many days or what have you.
Mm. Yeah, and then in regards to menopause, I assume that does, like you're basically in menopause, you finish menopause, like there's no peri, it's just like,
Yeah,
right? Really
I
short
don't
process.
know if that is the case for every woman, but I do know that it's common, and that was what I experienced. And so um now I believe that I won't go through menopause later because I don't have all the parts in there. But I'm not 100% sure on that.
Okay. What can I do mind if I add, do you still have your ovaries?
I do, yes.
Yeah. So I don't believe, so you won't go through menopause, but I think that is also helpful because when you get your ovaries out, then the estrogen is just like,
Mhm.
which is
Yeah.
not great. Women complain, when they hear the perimenopause process, it can be 10 years, but there's a
Yeah.
reason, there's a reason why it's that long. And I had a friend that had a similar hysterectomy experience where she got nothing. And it was very hard on her body. I mean,
Mhm.
in some ways it's easier to do it when you're younger, but there's a lot of risks involved in that. So it's
Yeah.
so unfortunate that, like they're just like, oh, it's not like cutting a finger off or something,
Yeah, and they don't, it wasn't explained to me about going through menopause or what could happen with my body later in regards to menopause. So when you were speaking about that, that was something I was thinking on, is how little information I had about long term, you know? And
right.
so with all this, especially my recent surgery, it was hard for me to feel like comfortable and safe in my body. And that was something that I really had to discover about myself. And it happened pretty recently, my work with, just getting comfortable, getting to know my body. And when you deal with these things, you have to be very compassionate towards your body, because it's hard not to get mentally beat down and focus on all the things your body can't do anymore. So I had to switch my lens and look at all the experiences my body has allowed me to have and what it still does for me. So I just wanted to put that out there for other women who have maybe gone through something similar. Just tons and tons of love and compassion for yourself and your body.
Yeah, I love that. And that was one of the main reasons I wanted to talk to you because, like I said, I haven't known Shay that long, but we like connected right away. And this piece of like, these are really hard things to have to deal with, and kind of like unfair and not going the way you thought it would. And it's easy to go down this like rabbit hole of like, well, why me? And this. And I imagine, I mean, I would go down that myself, but I know that you've managed to like, first, I wanted to talk to you because I think it's so important that we talk about all of these topics. That's why I started talking about menopause, because I love talking about this, because like no one talks about it. Nobody talks about problems with your bladder. Nobody talks about what happens if you get a hysterectomy in your 30s from something that was not appropriate, and nobody talks about this stuff. And I think it's so important. That's why I love like having a community to talk about this, because one of the main things that I feel like we feel like is that we're alone. And that makes everything worse. No matter what your problem is, you could have a broken arm. And if you think you're the only one that's ever broken their arm in the world, you're going to feel awful, So all of these like very kind of private things, that are going on. And we think like, oh, that's so embarrassing, or that's not okay. And I'm the only one. That isolation, I feel like is adds to, on top of like physical and emotional pain that you might already be going through. And so what do you feel like? I know that you mentioned your current husband is super supportive. Um, what have you felt has helped you the most in either or both of your surgeries and the whole experience and your experience with fibromyalgia? And what sort of things have helped you like kind of not get into that spiral, or maybe get out of it once you've been in it, or
Yeah.
help you heal in some way, however
Well,
it's.
I will say, we kind of touched on yesterday how, as you were saying, a lot of us don't have a lot of information because in some families, it's not something that's commonly talked about. And
Mhm.
so it's not until you kind of reach the point of going through it, or for me, that I'm thinking to ask my mother or my grandmother. And so for me at this point, they are no longer living. So I had to kind of find all this out for myself. And when I had my hysterectomy, I was married to my ex-husband, and that was not a supportive environment at all. It was an abusive environment. And so I can compare that to the experience I had with my current husband, who's super loving and supportive. So the things that really helped me were advocating for myself, making sure I had a doctor that I was comfortable with, that was treating me in a way that worked for me, and letting them know when it wasn't. Having a support system has helped me so much. My spouse, my older children, my best friend have all been great supports for me. And the thing that has really, really helped, as you were talking about, is not feeling alone. And sometimes we don't know where to look to get that sense of belonging, where other women have gone through what we have. So this is one of the reasons I love your platform and the things you talk about, because women really need other women. And sometimes we can't always figure out what to do in the moment, but just knowing that you're not alone mentally helps so much. And
No,
the last
I didn't pay her to
thing,
say that. I didn't pay her to say any of that
no,
about
she
me.
didn't. This was not rehearsed. But the last thing that really helped me, the recovery with my last surgery was very hard for me, mentally and physically. And the problems I was trying to correct in my body before the surgery are now worse than they were, because I had something different done than what was expected. But it was hard for me to accept that this is my body now. This is my body. These are the things that it's doing, and that might not get better. It made me feel older. It really affected my sensuality for a while as a woman, my sexuality. So I had to, do mental work to get into a space where I was, like I said, loving my body and showing it compassion, and feeling like I was still just as much of a whole woman as I was before my body went through these things.
Yeah, because that piece of the hysterectomy, it's like it's funny because it's, I don't regularly think about my uterus, right? But then once you're like, I don't have it, it really does something. And I feel like that is one thing as a male doctor, perhaps you can't really grasp the feeling of what that is. And I don't have any children, right? And that was a decision. But like, as I'm in perimenopause, right? So like as I get closer to not being able to, you're like, oh, I can't have kids. Like I actually don't want any, right? And so this piece of first having a big organ of your body removed, but also just this piece of like, oh, that's what makes us a woman and now we're not, or I feel like a lot of doctors don't take that piece into consideration, which is why I love talking about stuff like this, because it's like doctors also don't, I mean, there's good doctors that just don't have time either. They have like, got to do this for my insurance company or whatever, so it's not a great system that we've set up for that. But, I feel like what you're saying is really talking about it with other women. That could be the space where you can find support because not everyone has great friends or, you say your mom and your grandma passed away. I could talk about my health with my mom, but like menopause, like we never talked about that. She's alive and probably going to watch this and going to be mad at me for saying this, but just, that's not what my grandmother did. She doesn't want to talk about the stuff. I always try and make her talk about menopause. She was probably asleep when I'm talking about it on the phone. I don't know, but I feel like finding somewhere, whether it's communities online or some support group or, trying to connect with your friends and like finding the ones that you can get to talk about it. Cause I didn't know, like, one of my best friends, she and I talk about menopause a lot but we didn't before. I was like, hey, do you want to talk about menopause? And she was like, oh my God, yes, I want to talk about menopause, but like, if I
Yeah.
wasn't doing this work, we probably wouldn't have, because we have some other friends that are the same age that were like feeling really alone. And yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like, that is the piece that it's like, I'm the only one that's had a hysterectomy. I'm the only one who's in menopause. I'm the only one that's had this surgery, or you think there's gotta be some people, but not anyone near here. But, now
Yeah.
we have the internet, we're all near.
Well, and it's, sometimes we don't know where to look to get that. And I
Mm,
was really fortunate that we crossed paths in Indigo Women because one, you were a soul connection, like we talked about, but you had this content, and I thought, wow, the universe really set this up awesome because this is content I need right now, especially after the recent surgery I had. These things I feel like can make us feel like we're losing our essence as a woman. And so to have a space to be seen by other women and other women letting me see them and their experiences and what they've gone through in regards to this stuff has been really helpful.
that's great. And yeah, and so I could talk to you forever, really, but
Yeah, we can.
um is there anything else? And I'm sure you'll be on the podcast again. So if anyone's desperate to hear more from Shay, I know she'll be on again. But is there like, other than, like you mentioned, the support, your caring family, your children, your husband, your friends, and I imagine if you had had more information, that would have helped. Is there anything else that you think would help other women that have had these experiences, or just even on any of the topics we talked about, fibromyalgia, advocating for yourself? Any final tips on any of those things?
Yeah, this is not a fun one. It's been one of the biggest pains for me. But knowing your insurance plan is super helpful, knowing what your benefits are, or calling and finding out if you don't have questions, because there's many times in my experience I've been told, well, your insurance isn't going to cover that with this diagnosis or whatever the receptionist or doctor was telling me. And that was not the case. Things were covered or what have you. So knowing your coverage if you have insurance and that's what you're going to use was really helpful to me, because it did allow me to get treatments that I wouldn't have gotten otherwise and advocate for myself more. And just asking the questions that you need to really know your diagnosis and what it does to your body. I feel like I was really ill informed. I'm also diabetic. I didn't get diagnosed until in my 30s with that. And so it was a lot to learn. So just asking those questions to stay informed about your diagnosis, what it's going to do to your body, and your insurance benefits was helpful. That way, if you're having symptoms, now I know what's going on. And as I was telling you the other day, my husband's very observant of me and has pointed these things out, and it's helped. But knowing, if I'm feeling shaky, it might mean my blood sugar is low. So if you have
Mhm.
a lot of medical conditions, knowing that stuff helps you know better. This is related to this diagnosis, and this is what I need to do for myself right now.
Okay. And I would even add, it pains me to say this thing I'm about to say, but if it's gonna help you, bring a man. I
Yeah.
hate to like say that, but the thing is like, is your like feminist power stronger than your health? Like if you can do it
Mhm.
yourself and you feel like, but if you feel like you keep getting not you specifically, but anyone, and I've done this myself. My partner is a big, powerful man, and I live in Peru, which is a very macho country, including the women. People will speak directly to him. I'm also a foreigner, so it's a couple of things, but I'm fluent in Spanish, but they'll speak directly to him about things that aren't even as important about your health. But I've gone and he's got to kind of handle the situation, so it's even more exaggerated here. But although it pains my feminist heart to say such a thing, the most important thing is that you get the health care that you need. And
Mhm.
so you bring whoever, and like you said earlier, if you're having memory issues or you can't concentrate, it's especially hard to concentrate if you're getting some sort of information about yourself and you're already stressed. It's good even to bring up another person so they get the information. Especially if you
Yeah.
have a difficult diagnosis, you're like, I have what? And then your brain shuts off, so you're not
Mhm.
hearing the plan, the medicine, the options. So even if doctors say something good that would be helpful, you're maybe not even listening anymore. So I think it's good to have someone with you. And then if it helps to have a man, unfortunately, do what you have to do for your health.
Yeah, it's so nice to have a supportive husband who has my back, but not everybody has that. I found that my fiery best friend has also been good to take with me. Um, but like you said,
That
it's
friend.
nice to have someone with you. Um, to advocate for you if you need it, if that's available, and to remember things for you. Because, like you said, if you're dealing with chronic long term conditions and they cause hard side effects, sometimes, if you're seeing a bunch of different specialists to get a diagnosis or what have you, it's easy to get beat down and expect the same result from each doctor. So you're already struggling to accept this diagnosis and deal with what it's doing to your body, it's easy, like you said, to kind of shut down or not speak up for yourself or remember to ask everything you want to ask after you've gotten some difficult news. So, yeah, as much as we are capable of speaking up for ourselves, there are times when that's harder to do. So, if you have a support person to take with you, for me, that was really helpful and for you too. So, yeah.
Because I always wind up leaving the doctor's office like, damn it, I didn't ask that question. I didn't ask that thing, so
Well, I'm the type of person I have to write all my questions down or I'll forget something. So that's another benefit for me for taking my husband is he has a great memory and I can just tell him 5 questions and he'll remember. And so he lets me speak up for myself. So if I forget one, he'll be like, "Hey, babe, the blah, blah, blah." And I'm like, "Oh, yes, I wanted to ask." So having somebody with you can help you get to that space of speaking up for yourself, where maybe at first your husband's asking the questions like mine did for me. And then he's just giving you a little reminder. And now you're asking it for yourself. Those little
right.
steps to advocate for yourself and speak up for yourself for me, that kind of got me more comfortable to do that in that environment in an office with a doctor.
That's a great tip. Yeah, like saying it to you and then you say it. Yeah, that's good because then there's not this dynamic of especially two men talking about your health, which I don't care for. But yeah, and just kind of getting out of to this kind of 1950s idea of this white coat knows everything, right? I mean, I know sometimes doctors find me challenging because I do know stuff from I'm an herbalist, as you can tell. I mean, you already know that. This, I've even heard of doctors saying like, oh, would you get that in Dr. Google? When people do try and like figure out I'm sure it is annoying as a doctor. They're like, well, on Wikipedia, I read blah. It must be very frustrating for a doctor. Like, I stayed up all night looking at WebMD, which please do not do that. No one do that.
Don't.
No one look up what stomach pain on the left side and a headache means. Everyone has cancer. Don't please don't look. Please don't look. But this piece of like, the doctors up here and they know best and they're going to prescribe and tell you what it is and what it's about. And maybe that was okay then because there wasn't a lot of information and because doctors spent more time to really figure something out with you. Now it's like, I don't know, 4 minutes or something, they're in the room. And so it doesn't matter how much they know. It doesn't matter how much medical school, how much studying, like you're like, this feels bad inside of me. And
Yeah.
you're the one that knows that more than anyone else. So I feel like also remembering that and just like you said, thank you for your opinion, and then go to someone else.
Mhm. Yeah, and a lot of times doctors, if they kind of throw something at the symptoms, it's a pill, right? You have to go to the pharmacy and get a pill. So we also, or in my experience, are not educated or given the option of like herbal remedies or natural remedies. It's a lot of times things that pharmaceutical companies and doctors are making money off of. So it's important if you want to try those avenues, again, to speak up for yourself and ask your doctor what you need to know or seek out someone for yourself, like someone knowledgeable or in the field, that's maybe an alternate choice to a doctor.
Yeah, at least complimenting, you're like, I went to this doctor and I didn't like exactly what they said. I'm of course into all sorts of alternative medicine, acupuncture, Chinese medicine, etc. But some people aren't totally comfortable with that. But even as a compliment, them going together and just getting you to where you need to be and getting your answers, because it's frustrating. I know a lot of people that are like, oh, I don't know, I'll just take Tylenol every day because I'm in
Yeah.
pain, which, then it brings you down another train. But wait, I feel like we're going to go into, we could talk for 5 more hours about all sorts of medical things and other things and exciting things. So, yeah, so I think we'll stop here. Thank you so much, Shay. I loved having you on the podcast, and thank you so much for being open about your health challenges. I really appreciate your openness, and I know other women will too, because it's this type of openness that again like makes us not feel alone. And let's talk about it. There's no reason to not talk about these things because they're happening to me, they could be happening to you, they could be happening to someone and that community is how we can sort of heal all of our things together. So thank you so much.
It was my
And
pleasure. Thank you for giving me a space to talk. I really appreciate it.
you're welcome. And so please feel free to put any comments in the comments section if you have something to say, or you can write me privately. And if there's anything else you would love to hear about, either from myself or me and Shay together, we'd love to talk about it again. So, and you can also follow this podcast on YouTube. I'll put the link in the show notes. So thank you so much.
Bye.